Olivia and Ethan had always felt out of place in their own bodies. Since childhood, they had shared an unspoken bond, a connection that seemed deeper than simple friendship. As they grew older, that bond morphed into something more profound. They both longed to become the other. Olivia, with her sharp intellect and quiet demeanor, yearned for the strength and ease of masculinity, while Ethan, with his empathy and grace, desired the fluidity and warmth of femininity. Their identities never quite aligned with what they saw in the mirror. By the time they reached college, the two of them had come out to each other as transgender, and soon, their focus shifted toward making their dreams a reality. The problem was the cost. Transitioning was an expensive process, and between school, rent, and other expenses, they couldn't imagine affording the hormones, surgeries, and therapy sessions that lay ahead. It felt like an impossible mountain to climb on their meager student salaries. But then they discovered something, a rumor, really, about a remote village in Eastern Europe. People whispered about a clinic hidden deep in the Carpathian Mountains where a surgeon would perform gender confirmation surgeries for a fraction of the cost. It seemed too good to be true, but Olivia and Ethan were desperate. They scoured online forums and eventually stumbled across a website, crude and archaic, with nothing but a contact number and an address. It was risky. It was mysterious. But it felt like their only chance. One evening, they sat together in their cramped apartment, laptop open between them as they read through the sparse information they had gathered. Olivia, chewing on her nails as she always did when she was nervous, glanced over at Ethan. "Do you think this is real?" she asked. Ethan, who had been pacing back and forth, paused. "I don't know," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But what other option do we have? We can't afford the surgeries here. If there's even a small chance that this is legitimate." Olivia nodded. Her mind raced, but something about the village, the secrecy, itched at the back of her thoughts. She pushed the feeling down. They both had waited long enough. "Let's do it," she said finally. A month later, they were on a plane bound for Romania. Their savings had been scraped together to pay for the flights, the surgery, and the brief stay in a local inn before the procedure. The village, Velnik, was isolated, barely a speck on the map. From the airport, they had to take a bus that wound through narrow mountain roads, lined with thick, ancient forests. The farther they traveled, the more it seemed like the modern world fell away behind them. The towns they passed were small, gray, and silent. The people they saw from the window seemed to watch them with hollow eyes. By the time they arrived in Velnik, it was already dark. The village felt suspended in time. Cobblestone streets twisted through small clusters of stone houses, and lanterns hung from rusted hooks, their flickering lights casting eerie shadows over the landscape. There was an air of quiet isolation that made both Olivia and Ethan uneasy. They found the clinic easily enough. It stood at the edge of the village, an old, crumbling building half-shrouded by the forest. Inside, they were greeted by the surgeon, Dr. Halveth, a gaunt man with sharp, angular features and pale, glassy eyes. He spoke little English but gestured for them to follow. The consultation was brief. Too brief, perhaps. Dr. Halveth nodded at their requests, showing little emotion as he explained the procedure would be done simultaneously, a special method he had developed. The surgeries would be complete within hours. Olivia and Ethan exchanged a glance, excitement and fear mingling in their chests. They had come so far, there was no turning back now. The next morning, they were prepped for surgery. As they lay on adjacent tables, the sterile smell of the operating room mixing with the sharp tang of metal, Olivia reached for Ethan's hand. He grasped it tightly, his eyes reflecting the same nervous hope that bubbled in her chest. They were finally going to become who they truly were. "I'll see you on the other side," she whispered. Ethan smiled weakly. "Yeah. We'll be free." Those were the last words they exchanged before the anesthesia took hold. Olivia awoke to the sensation of rough, cold ground beneath her. Her body felt strange, wrong, as if the pieces of herself didn't fit together anymore. Panic flared in her chest. The sterile smell of the operating room was gone, replaced by the earthy scent of damp soil and dead leaves. She blinked, trying to focus, but all she could see was a dim, mist-covered forest stretching endlessly in every direction. She tried to sit up but couldn't. Something was pinning her down. Or was it her own body? Ethan? Her voice was shaky, barely a whisper. Olivia? Ethan's voice was close, too close. She looked down and gasped. They weren't in separate bodies. They weren't even separate people anymore. Where Olivia's torso ended, Ethan's began. Their bodies had been fused together in some grotesque, nightmarish way. She could feel his heartbeat through her own chest. Her legs were gone, replaced by Ethan's waist and his legs. What? What did they do to us? Olivia screamed, her mind spinning as the horror of their new reality set in. She struggled, but every movement sent waves of pain through their shared body. Ethan's hands clutched the ground, his breathing shallow and panicked. I don't know. Ethan sobbed, his voice cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were stuck. Not just together, but in a body that shouldn't exist. Conjoined in a way that defied nature, a horrifying mockery of their desires. They had wanted to become the other, but this was not what they had asked for. This was something else. Something wrong. They tried to move, to crawl along the dirt road they found themselves on, but their body was a tangle of confusion. Every attempt to coordinate sent searing pain through their flesh, as if their skin was being torn apart from the inside. The sky above them was a dull gray, and the forest around them was silent, save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. There was no sign of the village, no sign of the clinic, nothing but an endless stretch of road disappearing into the mist. How do we fix this? Olivia asked, her voice trembling with desperation. Ethan shook his head, his face pale and streaked with tears. I don't know. I don't know if we can. They had no choice but to keep moving, dragging their fused body along the dirt path inch by agonizing inch. Hours seemed to stretch into days, though the sun never seemed to rise nor set. Time felt frozen in that mist-shrouded landscape. Hunger gnawed at them, but there was no food, no water, no relief. The silence became oppressive. Every breath felt like a struggle, and the pain never lessened. They were trapped, not just in this foreign land, but within each other, forever tethered in a body that was not their own. As they crawled, they began to hear whispers on the wind. Soft, indistinct voices that seemed to echo through the trees. At first, they thought it was their own minds playing tricks on them, but the voices grew louder, more insistent. Wrong, the voices whispered. You are wrong. Who's there? Olivia called out, her voice cracking with fear and exhaustion. But there was no answer, only the constant whispers, a chorus of disembodied voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Change. You wanted change. The words twisted in their minds, filling them with a cold, creeping dread. The forest felt alive, watching them, mocking them. We have to go back, Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse from crying. We have to find the village, the doctor. Maybe we can fix this. But the road stretched on endlessly, and there was no sign of Velnik. The whispers followed them, growing more aggressive with each passing moment. You asked for this. You sought what was not meant to be. Now, you are what you wanted. Forever. Their shared body began to weaken, muscles straining under the unnatural fusion. They couldn't go on much longer. Every movement felt like fire burning through their veins, but the fear of what lay behind, or ahead, kept them going. And then, just as they were about to collapse from exhaustion, they saw something in the distance. A figure standing in the middle of the road. It was Dr. Halveth. He stood there, silent and unmoving, his pale eyes gleaming in the mist. Olivia and Ethan screamed for help, but he didn't move. He simply stared at them, his expression unreadable. What did you do to us? Olivia screamed, her voice raw with desperation. Dr. Halveth tilted his head, his lips curling into a cold smile. I gave you what you wanted, he said, his voice like a whisper carried on the wind. Change. Transformation. You wanted to become the other, and now you are. This isn't what we asked for. Ethan cried, his voice breaking. The doctor's smile widened. But it is what you deserved. You tampered with forces you did not understand. You sought to change the unchangeable, to defy nature.